Welcome back to another episode and to another season of the Draw Control podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by incoming freshman on the North Carolina women's lacrosse team, Kate Levy. Kate just finished up her senior year at McDonogh High School, where she was a team captain and was just named an All-American as well. Kate, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us today. And how is everything going?
Yeah, everything's going well. Thank you for having me. I'm wrapping up my senior year this next week. I have graduation. It's been a good year.
That's awesome. Yeah. How has your senior year been going for you, both on and off the field? It must be pretty crazy to know that it's almost done.
Yeah, it doesn't feel real. I think it's been a great year on and off the field. I've made some great friends at McDonogh that I will have for my whole life. And same can be said on the field. I've privileged enough to be playing with some of the best players and some of my best friends. And it's just been a great experience all around.
That's good. That's good. Well, let's talk about your season this past year. So your team had a really good season, only losing one game and making it all the way to the championship game. My question for you is, what'd you take away from your team's performance this season and your individual performance as well?
I think as a team, we grew a lot. It was really awesome getting to know and growing closer to everyone on the team. And I think we continued to improve every single game on the season. And, it didn't end how we wanted it to, but I still think a lot came away from that. And individually, I just think I had a lot of fun playing with everybody and playing against some great competition. And obviously, there's still much to improve on, but I think overall it was really good.
Yeah, and obviously you're a team captain, so I'm curious what your leadership skills were like for this year and how you hope to translate those leadership skills into next year as a freshman in college.
Yeah, I think this year being a senior, you hope that everyone looks up to you and that you can lead by example and not only be very vocal, but also show people how to lead. And I think going in next year, obviously I'm gonna be a freshman, so I'm not gonna be like top dog. But I don't know, I just want to be a really good teammate and be a likable person who people like to be around and play with.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think the example leadership is more important than the vocal leadership because I feel like everyone can talk very well, but if you're not actually doing what you're saying you want to, I feel like it's hard for other people to follow that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about your individual performance this year. So, from my research, you're a midfielder, and from some of the highlights I've seen, you're really great in transition, have good speed, and you set up your attackers well. My question is to you is describe your game and what do you hope to bring to North Carolina for next season? Like, what can fans expect when they watch you play?
Yeah, I try and be very versatile. Obviously, I'm a midi, so I'm on both ends of the field. And I think defensively, I like my teammates to trust that I'm going to hold my 1v1s. I'm going to talk, be very vocal. And then offensively, this year I had a big role just because I was one of the leaders on the team. And, I like to make the smart decision and not always force things. And I think I'll continue to work on that. And yeah, I think I bring a lot of IQ to the game, and that's something that I can really focus in on.
And how do you work on being a two-way midfielder? I'm always been curious about that. How do you sort of know when to focus on the defensive side a little bit more or when to sort of focus on the attacking side a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that on the offensive end, it's a lot easier to train because you can shoot, you can dodge on your own, you can do a lot of stick work, and defensively, it is a lot of footwork, and you can train that. But at the same time, a lot of it is being taught angles and like when to make contact, and that it takes some more people and also a lot more coaching if it doesn't come naturally. So I think for me at least, I definitely train the attacking part more because I can and I can do it on my own. And then defensively, it's always come a little more naturally just from playing different sports. That footwork's been there. And then obviously, you can train like ladders and running and change of direction. And that's kind of how you train defensively.
Now, what are some things you'll be working on this summer before you arrive on campus this fall?
I think one thing I'm definitely focusing on right now is showing up fit because that's one thing that is in my control. And then another is my dodging, my stick work. Stick work can always improve, and also my creativeness with the ball and my stick.
Yeah. When do you guys officially start like practicing as a team? I know fall ball sort of begins like in October. I'm sort of curious, like does your mom sort of give you like a month off to sort of get used to the academic side of things and then you guys start actually practicing as a team? What's sort of the rules
Yeah.
for that?
Yeah, I think if I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure we get like a month just to kind of get used to school, and everything and just being in college. I know that a lot of girls do stuff on their own, even like together, even when we don't have team sanctioned practice. And then starting in October, like you said, or like late September, we can start practicing as a team.
Nice, nice. Well, it seems far away now, but I feel like it's going to go by pretty fast. So obviously, I'm looking forward to the season already starting, and it just ended last week. So,
Yeah, right. I know. It's exciting.
well, let's transition now and talk about the beginning of your lacrosse career and sort of work all the way up to where you are today. So, you're from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Talk about growing up there and how did you start playing lacrosse?
Yeah, so I mean, North Carolina it's not a huge lacrosse hotbed. It's not a Maryland or Long Island. So I actually started playing boys lacrosse when I was little because my brothers played for a club called the Carolina Cannons. So I'm not sure what age I started, but I did start with a boys lacrosse stick in my hand and fully padded up. And then eventually when I was in like sixth grade, I for the first time I really started playing girls lacrosse and I joined Carolina Fever, which is a club, and I joined that for 2 years.
Nice. Is the transition from boys lacrosse to girls lacrosse tough, or does it have some advantages? Because from at least from my perspective, obviously the boys game's a lot more physical than the women's game is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very different. I didn't really know what 3 seconds was. I got called for that a lot because that's not a thing in the guys' game. And I think the physicality of the boys' game, even though I was younger and everyone was much smaller and we're just kind of running around with our heads cut off, I still think the physical aspect helped me with my dodging and just being able to handle pressure.
I do like the helmets in the boys game. That's the one thing that I wish they would. I don't know how you feel about it. Do you wish in the women's game they had the men's helmets, or do you like sort of the headgear that you guys have in the women's game?
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's nicer to wear goggles. It's not heavy, it's not blocking as
Mhm.
much. I think the women's game has gotten much more aggressive. So if there's a way we can rein that in, then I don't
Mhm.
think there's a need for helmets. But I do think as a safety, I mean, they have the women's helmets now, which I don't prefer, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I'm sort of curious as well, like growing up, who are some of your favorite players and teams that you like to watch?
Well, obviously I watched my mom's team a lot and the men's team. So I loved watching like Kara Cannizzaro, Marie McCool, a lot of different, I mean, everyone. I idolized every single person on my mom's team growing up. And um, I'm not really, I mean, I just watched a lot of lacrosse in general. I didn't, other than my mom's team and the North Carolina men's team, I didn't watch anyone specific. So just whoever they played that day, I guess. But yeah, that's those are my teams.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned that you have two older brothers, Alec and Ryan, who they also both play for North Carolina lacrosse. I'm just wanting to ask you, what's it like being the youngest sibling, and how have your brothers sort of helped you out in your lacrosse career? I'm assuming they pushed you a lot, if I had to guess.
Yeah, they've definitely made me a tougher person, that's for sure. I got teamed up on a little bit when I was younger, not only being the youngest, but also being the only girl. They'd like to push me around. I think for me, they've been very good role models and they've always pushed me. They've been great motivators. And I just have always looked up to them. Whenever they were going out to shoot or play wall ball, I would want to follow them. I'd be right on their coattails and I'd ask and even if it would annoy them, they're like, "Oh, you're so bad right now. Like you're so little, you're annoying. Get away." They would always find a way to include me.
That's awesome. And yeah, definitely the toughness aspect for sure. It must, and I feel like that had to benefit you in some way. Because like you
Yeah.
mentioned, the girls' game's getting a lot more aggressive and physical. So you were probably already used to some of that growing up.
Yes, I can take a hit, that's for sure. And I can credit that to my brothers.
Now, obviously, your mom, Jenny Levy, is the head coach for North Carolina women's lacrosse. I want to ask you, what is she like as a mom off the field, and how has she sort of helped you in your lacrosse career leading up to this point? And how excited are the both of you that she'll be coaching you next season? What's that dynamic gonna be like? Because obviously, you have to sort of separate mother-daughter relationship versus coach and player relationship when you guys are on the field.
Yeah, I mean, as a mother, she's awesome. She's the best that gets. She's super supportive. She's also very motivating. She pushes me and my brothers to be the best we can be because she sees our potential. But she is really fun to be around. She's a very funny person, can make you laugh. But she can also be tough on you when she needs to be and when we need to be put in line. So, that was a good balance growing up. Um, I think going into North Carolina, obviously she's my coach. It's a little bit different. It's gonna be different, but I think we're both really excited and we're just gonna take it day by day. I think it's definitely gonna present some challenges, but we get along very well. So I think that it will definitely work out and it'll actually be a really fun experience.
Yeah, that's not many people get to have that experience. So I remember seeing a story about Yale men's hockey, and this guy, he was committed to play for UConn hockey, but then he switched his commitment last minute to play with his dad because his dad was the head coach at Yale. And he said it's an opportunity that you'll never sort of get to be coached by your father. So he said it's sort of like he would always regret it if he never did it. So I'm assuming you sort of feel the same way about that, just because your mom's such an icon and just
Yeah.
such a great person in lacrosse. So it would be sort of like an opportunity that you sort of would regret if you never did.
Yes, exactly. And I grew up being taught by her a little bit. I've never actually been coached by her, but we would go out to the field every once in a while and play some lacrosse. So I think it's definitely, I mean, I'm lucky to have her right in my back pocket.
Now, like you mentioned, you haven't just played lacrosse at McDonogh throughout your career, you also play club lacrosse. So just talk about your club lacrosse experience and sort of what that was like for you.
Yeah, so in about like seventh or eighth grade, I think I came up to Maryland to play for M&D. And I think it was a great experience. I got to play a really high level of lacrosse. Um, I think we maybe lost like two games the whole time I was on that team, two or three games. So obviously we were very talented and everyone was super welcoming and really awesome. I think we also played the best competition on that team, so it made it really fun.
Now, you also had the chance to represent the USA on the women's U20 roster. Talk about getting the opportunity to represent your country and what that experience was like for you both on and off the field, because obviously it must have been really beneficial getting the chance to play against other highly committed D1 players, because that makes that transition going into college much easier for yourself in the next few months.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was an awesome experience. It still is. It's still ongoing. I have a training camp in June. It was super fun to play with such high level players and get being coached by such a great coaching staff. I think it definitely the speed of play was much faster than just my normal high school game. So that was really fun and definitely it's a good like preview for what I'm about to be dropped into. Yeah, it's been really awesome and meeting new people from everywhere. It's been really fun.
Yeah. Obviously, the lacrosse is going to be in the Olympics in 2 years. How excited are you for that? Because assume that's one of the reasons. I just feel like it's cool to see some more international lacrosse being played with the U20 tournament. And I think there was an international tournament a few years ago. Hopefully they bring that back soon.
Yeah, I think lacrosse in the Olympics is awesome and it's an awesome opportunity to grow the game.
Now, how has your club and high school lacrosse experience sort of helped you prepare you for North Carolina?
I think definitely it's been super high level. So I've got to play with and against some amazing players, and it's just really helped me grow as a player, and I get to try new things and learn from a bunch of different people. So I think that's really been beneficial for me.
And what do you think's sort of been the biggest improvement you've made to your game during your senior year that you think's going to help benefit yourself this fall?
I think during my senior year, I've definitely improved on the draw control. I before I came to McDonogh, I never really took it. And I think Taylor Cummings really helped me with that my junior year. And then I just continued, I kind of honed in on it this year and tried to really be the best I could. Um, we'll see if that is used at Carolina. I'm not really sure. We'll see. I mean, I'll keep working on it, and then if I'm good enough or if they need me, I'm there. But yeah.
Yeah. And obviously Taylor Cummins is arguably the best draw taker of all time. What did you learn from her that you think helped you in the draw circle? I don't want you to reveal all your secrets, so opponents aren't listening to this and getting any ideas, but I am curious if you can give a little insight about what she taught you on the circle.
Yeah, I think mostly she taught me how to adjust. I think going like taking the draw and before I took it a lot, it was just, okay, this is how I take it every single time. This is what I'm gonna try and do. And I think she really just taught me how to like place it. And if the ball's in your stick and you're going like, or even if the ball's not in your stick, knowing where your person's gonna be and just kind of anticipating. I think that was the biggest thing she taught me.
Well, let's go and talk about your recruiting process now, since this is a college lacrosse podcast after all. What was your recruiting process like to North Carolina, and what made you want to go there versus other schools you might have looked at? Obviously, I feel like it was probably very not that hard to convince you to go to Chapel Hill.
Yeah, my recruiting process was short and sweet. I committed the very first day we were able to. I think I always knew as a kid I wanted to play for my mom, and I sat down with my dad before everything after the summer was over of my recruiting season. And he was just listing schools, and he was like, "You want to play at a top school, you want to win." Because at first I wanted to keep my options open. I was like, you know what? It would be really cool to see some schools and just compare them to Carolina, even though I think deep down I always knew I was going to Carolina. Um, and he started listing schools, and I just couldn't see myself going to any one of them. I was like, oh gosh, no, like, uh-uh.
Yeah.
So I think that it was super easy. I mean, not only is the lacrosse program awesome, but the school community, all of the athletics, every single sport competes in a national championship like almost every other year. And then it also has very high academics. So I'll be getting a great education while having a really good lacrosse career.
Did your mom even have to give you a pitch to your dad or someone like that, or was it just like she already knew that you were probably going to commit there? She just
No,
didn't even say a thing.
he called me on September 1st and said, "Do you want to be a Tar Heel?" And I said, "Yeah." That's all
That's
it
awesome.
took.
You guys get to play in the ACC, obviously. From your perspective, what makes the ACC different from other conferences in college lacrosse, playing style wise? And obviously, you get to add two new teams next year in Stanford. So I'm just curious what that's going to be like for your team getting to do the West Coast trip next season, but also just sort of playing style wise compared to other conferences like the Big Ten.
Yeah, well, I think the ACC is probably the most competitive conference in the country. It's really high level, it's fast, it's skilled, and I just think that differs from some just because there are so many high level players on each of the teams. I'm excited for the West Coast trips and playing Stanford. Obviously, one of my best friends, Amanda Lawson, is going there next year, so being able to play her and see her every year or every other year, depending on how they do it, will be really fun. But yeah, I just think the ACC is super competitive, and adding Stanford will be a great challenge.
I wonder what that's going to be like for them, basically going the East Coast every other week. That's going to be kind of tough, especially with school trying to get that done on the side as well.
Yeah, I know that will be very difficult.
Now, how much North Carolina lacrosse did you watch this past year? And have you had the chance to meet all of your future teammates yet, or are there a few that you still need to get their phone numbers?
Yeah, I have gotten to meet everyone just over the years. I watched every single game that I could. If I didn't have a game or practice, I was sitting on the couch watching it or watching it on my phone if I was out somewhere. And yeah,
Now, what are you most excited about when you think about playing for North Carolina next season?
I mean, playing with a bunch of really awesome athletes and lacrosse players. I think it's really special to go to a place like North Carolina and play with a bunch of people who have the same goals as you and are as motivated to, win games, be the best they can be.
And what do you think is going to be sort of the biggest adjustment you have to make to college lacrosse? Obviously, we sort of talked about some of the stuff you're working on this summer to make that transition easier for yourself, but I feel like you don't understand what it's like until you actually sort of get there. So I'm curious, when you've been thinking about next year, what do you think sort of that biggest adjustment is that you're going to have to make?
Definitely the speed of the game and the physicality. I just think college lacrosse is a lot more, it's just constantly going. It's very fast paced and there's just a lot of new concepts that are introduced in college lacrosse that a lot of high school level coaches don't teach. So I think that'll be a really big adjustment.
Yeah, obviously there were some new rule changes this past year. Is that going to be adjustment for yourself, sort of getting used to sort of, especially as a midfielder with some of the cards that got called? It seemed like some of the referees were very either strict about it or were sort of very loose about it. So I'm curious, sort of when you were watching some of those games, what was sort of your mindset on that?
Yeah, I like to think of myself as a pretty clean player. So I think a lot of the cross checks that are called, I think I'm good with that. But I do think the green cards within the 30, um, I'm used to riding and I like riding hard. So I think that'll be a challenge, not fouling, even if it's like a little soft foul and nothing like refs are calling it. So that's probably going to be a big challenge.
Now, what are your team and individual goals and expectations for next season? Obviously, North Carolina, from my perspective, suffered some tough injuries this past year, which I think sort of affected the standings a little bit. And obviously, sort of disappointing not to make it further in the tournament. So, obviously, the team's going to be motivated to make the Final Four again. I'm assuming you're sort of already know what that's going to be like for yourself, sort of the expectation to be the best team in the country.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a lot of returning talent next year, and all the players in my class are also very talented. So I think obviously we want to improve on last season and ultimately win games and big games. And I don't know team goals yet because I still haven't gotten there, but I think ultimately it's to win.
So let's transition now to a segment I like to call the non-lacrosse segment, where I ask you some non-lacrosse set questions to get to know you a little bit more off the
Okay.
field. So first question is, obviously baseball players are known to have a walk-up song before each at bat. So my question is, if lacrosse had walk-up music, what would your walk-up song be?
I had to put a little bit of thought into this because I think I would have many different answers, but I think Shut Up and Drive by Rihanna. I'm a big
Hmm,
Rihanna fan.
that's a good answer. I don't know what I would pick. Probably some like motivational song. I have to think about that.
I think a
But
lot of like AC/DC is good and
yeah.
other like old rock and roll songs are pretty good hype
Yeah.
ups
Or
too.
like some new like hip hop from like a few years ago. I feel like that always gets me pumped up. I feel like you need something to get the juices flowing before each at bat, or in this case, if they're announcing your name for a lacrosse game.
Mhm.
Now, speaking of lacrosse, what's your most embarrassing lacrosse moment?
I try to think about this and I couldn't really pinpoint like one specific moment, but I think like looking back on pictures and seeing like when I'd be in the car and I would be like ready, sticking my hand, mouth guard and goggles. I mean, I don't know if that's embarrassing or funny, but
I think that's
I
kind of cool and
it's
it showed that you always cared about the game growing up.
yeah, I was ready to play at all moments.
Now, speaking of going to the West Coast next year to face Stanford, where is one place you would love to travel to one day?
I think one place that my mom and I have always talked about is Greece. I think Greece would be really cool. Obviously. there's some very like well-known touristy areas, but I think some of the islands that are less known and just really naturally beautiful would be really cool.
I feel like for me, probably like Toronto, Canada. I know that's not a typical place, but it looks like a lot of fun. So that would be mine.
I went with my mom when I was younger, to actually see the Women's World Cup.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
yeah, it was really cool. I do recommend.
Was that the one where Carly Lloyd scored like 4 goals or something like that against Japan, or was it another game? Because I
That
remember watching that.
that might have been then. Yeah.
Yeah,
I went for the Soccer World Cup and then I also went for the Women's Lacrosse World Cup. That was in Toronto.
that's awesome. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
I have the World Cup's coming to the US in 2 years, and that's one of my sports bucket list is to see a World Cup game. So hopefully that can get accomplished in
Very fun.
2026. It looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is.
Now, what is the most interesting thing you've read or seen this week?
I don't know if this was this week, but it was recently that college athletes can now get paid by the
Mhm.
university. I thought that was really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how that affects college athletics.
How do you think it's going to affect women's lacrosse? Is it more of like a football or basketball thing, or is it going to be in every sport? Because that's
Yeah.
something I was curious about as well.
I mean, I think initially it'll definitely impact football, basketball, the big revenue sports first. And then I think maybe eventually it'll trickle down into like women's lacrosse or like a field hockey or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I don't know what to think because I think obviously it's good that the NIL stuff finally happened. I feel like that was long overdue, but I'm a little afraid that it might, I guess, affect smaller schools that might not have as much money as bigger schools. And it's cool to have sort of that competitive balance. In certain sports, I feel like you see that sometimes where some of the bigger schools sort of always win every year. So I think that's something that I hope they can make some sort of rules and regulations where there can be some sort of competitive balance, sort of like a salary cap, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
for me, honestly, this is a lacrosse answer, but the national championship game last week, that was, in my opinion, the best women's lacrosse game I've ever seen. Just how Northwestern was up, and I thought they were probably going to pull it away. And then BC came back. It was just a really fun game, and I think it just showed why women's lacrosse is such a great sport and why more people should watch because there's so many incredible players. And I just
Yeah.
thought it was a great game, and I had a fun time watching it. Definitely one of my favorite games I've seen, and it was cool because I had the chance to interview some of the BC players back in the fall. So
Mhm.
getting to see them accomplish their dreams and win a national championship was
Yeah.
really cool for me to see, and hopefully we can get some of them back on the podcast to talk about it. But I just thought it was a great game.
Yeah, it was. It was very entertaining to watch. I think a lot of people early counted BC out, but they climbed back and won it. It was
Yeah, I feel
awesome.
like you can't do that, especially with how well Dolce is as a goaltender.
I know, yeah. You can never count them out.
Now, if you could have lunch with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Um, I think Kevin Hart because he's hilarious and I think he'd make me laugh. And I think he would also just be a very like fun person to hang out with for
Yeah.
lunch.
So I like to switch up my answer for this question every time we do it. I'd say Drake May. I'm a huge Patriots fan. He seems like a fun quarterback, and since you're going to North Carolina, I thought that would be a good answer for
That's
this
a good
question.
answer. That is a good answer. I'm not a big Patriots fan. I'm a Ravens fan, so I'm
Oh,
upset.
so you're upset that he's coming over here?
But I do wish him the best. So
Yeah, he seems like a nice kid. So hopefully,
mhm.
I haven't seen too much of him play, but I'm excited for a new quarterback because
Yeah,
we need a
well,
change here in New
very
England.
talented.
It was a tough. It's been a rough past couple of years for the Pats. But
Yeah.
now, last non-lacrosse question just is if you could appear in one TV show, which TV show would that be?
Um, I did a movie. Is that fine?
Yeah, TV show and movie.
Uh,
I think I had that listed, so that's my
yeah.
fault.
I recently rewatched Meatballs with Bill Murray, and I think being one of the kids in the summer camp would be really fun because they're always up to no good and it just seems like a blast.
Yeah. I think for me, probably like Good Will Hunting. That's a great movie. That'd be cool to be in that.
But
Um, or like Cars, like be a voice actor in Cars. I always
yeah,
liked that movie, so probably one of those two.
that's a good one. That's a really good one.
Now, getting back to some final questions now, before we end this interview, just what advice would you give to younger players who want to pursue a D1 scholarship like you? What can they do to sort of make their chances go higher, and how can coaches sort of contact them and sort of that just advice for them to get, I guess, noticed?
Yeah, I think definitely work hard and control the controllables. You can always change your attitude and be a very positive person on the field or on the court or whatever sport you're playing. You always give off a certain vibe to you. And I think coaches really notice that if you're a really happy person and, always positive, pumping your teammates up, I think that's a really good way to get noticed. And then also, I didn't have to do it, but a lot of my friends and teammates had to reach out to coaches and don't be afraid to like put yourself out there.
Now, what should be done to help grow women's lacrosse from your perspective? I think last weekend having it on ESPN obviously gets more viewers, but anything that you can think of that can help the sport grow even more.
I think just on a very basic level, especially in different countries that don't, have maybe the resources to have all the equipment and everything. I think making it super easily accessible is a really good start because, it doesn't take much. If you get a stick in someone's hand, they can fall in love with the sport in an instant and then be motivated to keep playing it and, fall and just keep falling in love with it over and over again. Um, yeah, I think that obviously it being televised on ESPN and the media aspect can always grow and just bringing it to people's attention.
Hmm. Well, one more question for you, Kate, is just any shout outs you want to give to your former teammates, future teammates, family members, and friends, and who should we have on the podcast next?
I'll give a shout out to McDonogh Girls Lacrosse, best 2 years ever. And I think the next person you should have is Liza Osborne. She's not only going to be my Carolina teammate, but she's also my roommate next year. And she's also doing the USA U20 training camps with me. So she'd be a great guest. And she's from Colorado. So,
That's
the West,
awesome.
she
That's awesome.
represents.
Yeah, we'll definitely reach out and see what she has to say. But Kate, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and coming on the pod. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best for next year with North Carolina, and I know you're going to do great. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.